Hi, I'm Jock.
Hey, I'm Ray.
You're listening to The Pig Wrestlers, a podcast where Ray and I are reviewing this book, Never Wrestle With A Pig by Mark McCormack. Ember. So you were talking about them because they've just raised a funding round this week, a successful funding round, which is great news for them. And I like the look of them a great deal. So they are essentially a firm that automates most of the jobs that an accountant traditionally does on behalf of a small business, as I understand it.
Yes.
Because the vast majority of stuff for a small business is essentially, how can I be more tax efficient? How do I calculate the various things that I need to be doing? And most of that doesn't require a person, it requires an algorithm, right? So I think this is super interesting because for me, as a massive supporter of FreeAgent, and indeed a very small investor in it briefly for a period of time, I really like their approach. But since their acquisition by RBS, it's kind of like beginning to feel a bit more stagnant, a bit slower, and not quite as game-changing as it used to be. Given the complexity of all of these changes in taxation and everything else, are Ember going to be able to keep up, and are they going to be able to deal with this?
So Ember does two things for me. It automates all the things that you need to do, your VAT, your payroll, your corporation tax, your company's house filings, your pension submissions to whichever auto-enrollment provider. Right? I literally have to expend zero mental effort on any of these things. And that's the second thing, is I have no mental anxiety now over what's happening with the company's finances, because Ember is on top of it. It gives me a simple dashboard saying what we owe, what's coming in. It's taken away all of my anxieties, put me completely in control, and I spent zero effort, like genuinely zero effort, into all the things you used to have to do by hand. And they're adding more functionality all the time. And they have a very simple system. If you have a suggestion, they say, can you just enter it here? And they're just working their way through it. And it sounds simple from a product management perspective, that your customers are telling you the things that they need, and the things that are most pressing are the ones they work on. But most companies don't do this. They just don't.
Yeah.
And their approach, I think, is boneheadedly simple. You bank wherever you bank. Right, so when Tide came out, I was a huge fan of George Bevis and the Tide account that was built on an e-money license rather than going to get a banking license. Great, does everything I needed to do. Don't need to borrow. Why do they need a banking license? But they didn't do anything with the product, didn't innovate. And Ember's come along, same spiel, again, a lightweight approach like Tide started with, but this time they say, just plug in the open banking from whichever bank account or multiple bank accounts as we have, and we'll sort it all out. And it's just like, why is no one else doing this? Like, it's literal magic. My VAT, I can see the number as it's going on. I click the tax tab. I can see my PAY, my VAT, corporation tax. It's just totaling it up. And then I categorize transactions, make sure I tag the right VAT amount, whether there is any VAT, and it does all the rest. I just don't need to think about it.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, up until recently, I thought FreeAgent was the pinnacle of achievement in regards of not making me having to think about this stuff. But the problem I always had was that I was paying for my license of FreeAgent to be able to see the stuff I was doing. I was also paying an accountant separately to manage in Iris as opposed to FreeAgent and get them to have to replicate the accounting so I could see what was happening in the books without it being in this opaque system over here. What Ember is doing is effectively combining these two things and automating it still further. And sensibly, I note, if I do a like-for-like comparison, they're coming in about 60% for those two services combined.
You know what it is? It's a genuine platform. Right? They've got all their functionality in the automation. So I'm just doing the R&D tax credits now. They plug into Claimer. Claimer is, again, a nice automated system. They send across all the data.
They don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
They don't have to. There's, as you say, there's so many individual piecemeal services with APIs that can be called. If you feed it the right information, it'll spit out the right result. They are specialized. They're individually the best expert solution to that particular micro problem. And as you say, as a platform, they're just pulling in the best of breed of each of them and pulling it all together into one cohesive unit.
And the way I operate, I like to ask questions, right? I think everything gets solved by asking questions. And so we asked, what are all the different ways we can do the R&D tax credits? So the team didn't spend much time on it, but found all the different firms doing it, found out how to do it ourselves. And actually, we can totally do it ourselves. I've actually done all the calculations. Bit iffy on writing the report. Maybe you need someone to write a report, but paying someone 15 to 25% to write the report and do all that stuff, no, thank you very much. But because I'm an Ember customer, they plug directly into Claimer. Claimer charges 5%. I get a discount because I'm an Ember customer. And actually, you know what? I don't begrudge 5%. Not the end of the world. For it to be a thing I don't think about.
That's the thing. If Ember can keep up with the increasingly labyrinthine taxation rules and
I think that's the key, right? They keep up with it, so we don't have to.
Oh, I agree. And that is absolutely the selling point. The thing is, can they? Because it just seems to be at the moment just exponentially more complex.
They raise 1.6 million quid to do that, right?
Yeah, invest in a lot of tax accountants because they're going to need them.
Dan on the team, who is their accountant, product manager, he gets it. Like, he really does. I would recommend anybody who wants to test it out, just drop Dan at ember.co an email and just try it out. I wouldn't say I'm a skeptic, but I do stand back a little and try and do my research and take a look at stuff. And having been disappointed with services like Tide and Starling and Revolut and Monzo Business and Coconut, I had high hopes for Coconut, not quite getting there. I closed my Coconut account recently. They said, why? I said, take a look at Ember. And they asked, why? And I was like, look, I have no anxiety now with Ember. It does the stuff that both you and Tide said you would do, but haven't come around to doing. And that's what gives me confidence, right? They're doing the stuff. It's often the case in startup land where a startup comes along, does its TechCrunch announcement saying, we're going to solve X. And 5 years later, X isn't solved. Yeah.
Whereas they're doing it by showing what they've done.
Right. And honestly, I think they underraised 1.6 million. Whoever invested has got a deal. Like, if you think about what losses are being wrapped up by all the other challenger business banks and what Ember are doing, where they don't have to have all that regulation, being a bank of any kind of sort, they just open banking plugin. Here you go. It's done.
Yeah.
They filed my annual accounts. Like, I just had to check it and say it was okay.
Yeah.
Like, I've never had such an easy process, and I've been running businesses for 20 years.
Yeah. And the thing is that automating the things they've done, I know that FreeAgent is just on the cusp of, providing something similar. They've been talking about it for a little while. It's on their roadmap. But as I said, the time they've been talking about it, Ember's just quietly gone ahead and done it. And this is the point at which I think I realized just this week. It's like they're not innovating as much as they used to. I used to have a picture of FreeAgent's depot roadmap where they had a public-facing roadmap. And that was cool. And it just suddenly occurred to me, I haven't looked at it in ages. And also the two or three things that I'm looking forward to just seem to be happening slower and slower and slower. And I suspect it's probably post-acquisition. I think things have changed.
I think this world of business banking is ripe for disruption. People have funded companies to do it. Those companies have failed us, largely. They just haven't done their job. They've taken the money and just, sort of coasted.
And it's a lot easier to chop and change these days than it used to be.
It is easy to chop and change, but what I would say is no one's getting a good service today from business banking.
I would absolutely agree with that.
like the incumbents, the challengers, they're all doing a disservice to their customer base. And I think Ember is just a breath of fresh air. Like, they're actually delivering value and giving me hope that, like, the stuff you're going through with VAT, that won't be something you're going to have to worry about if you're an Ember customer. If they're not automated right now, they'll take care of it for you and show you what to do, because that helps them then automate it.
Ooh, and that reminds me of something else. So, incomprehensible taxation rules and that kind of thing, there's a company that will look at a contract and effectively parse it digitally. Because if you think about a contract, it's a bit like a bit of programming, right?
You're seeing the reverse seed legals. For seed legals, you say the terms and it creates the contract.
Yeah.
You're saying give it the contract and it just takes out and gives you in like simple bullet points what's what.
And it also checks that it all matches up, because, you know, how many times have you
Right.
received a cut and paste contract where suddenly some new terms get introduced that haven't been defined elsewhere and it's inconsistent? I need to look up the name. It's just the name has just escaped me. I'll either flash it up on the screen and post, or I'll put it in the description as well. A little bit of dubbing. It's
Simplifier.
that'll do. So yeah, super interesting, because I'd been personally ranting on about the fact that effectively a contract was like a piece of programming, in that everything has to be defined up front.
Bad programming.
Yeah. Shoddy. Because it would never compile, right? It would never actually spit out something coherent at the end of the process. And that's why we have all the legal contests, is because, as you say, something is not defined clearly enough, or it's defined ambiguously, or whatever. Yeah. And in programming land, that would chuck an exception.
The world of legal injustice is going to be in crisis very soon. The moment somebody actually delivers some real value in terms of tech or AI, it's, why are we spending time with lawyers for standard form stuff? It just doesn't make any sense. Why is the justice system wasting everybody's time, taxpayers' money, doing stuff that is just routine?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of automation. As you say, Ember's an interesting example because it's looking at the world of bookkeeping, accountancy, and automating stuff that essentially needs to be automated.
Everything. We use Zero at Unmortgage. You know, I've written in Fox Pro accounting packages for our property management. Like, it's painful stuff, right?
Yeah.
And Ember's the first thing that actually gives me confidence that there's hope in the world. Like, I'm sick and tired of still talking about this stuff. We did that Clubhouse on PropTech this week.
Yeah.
And so you asked me how it went. So Nick Russell, who's like, you know, PropTech stalwart, came on and said, why are we having the same discussion we were having in 2012? And like, this is the whole point. This is what I've been writing for so many years. You know, my famous piece was your PropTech is It is. It's all not doing the job. And Ember gives me hope. They've come along. I'm sorry, it works? What do you mean it's automated? I can check it myself. I don't need to call someone. Like, it's doing for your business banking and accountancy what Octopus Energy have done with Kraken, right? They've just made it so that you feel in control. Their staff are in control, you're in control. There's just less time we need to spend on this stuff. I don't have to have the mental anxiety about it. I don't know if most people know this, but the power behind Octopus Energy's rise is this system at the middle of it called Kraken. And it's so good at managing customer data and customer interactions that they've now started licensing it out to all the other energy providers.
They built it themselves, yeah?
And they built it themselves. And so now, if Octopus Energy want to grow through acquisition, it's super easy because the people that they're acquiring are using Kraken, so they can very easily integrate. They know what's going on with the customers because, you know, would you mind just giving us access? We haven't been looking anyway. And super smart. And I was speaking to somebody recently who's doing a deep dive into mortgage servicing in the US. So, mortgage originated, and then you've got to do all the billing and payments and whatever else afterwards. And it's an afterthought, right? It's horrible. And I was saying, look, if you want to understand what the best practice of this is, look at what Greg Jackson's done at Octopus Energy in how the center of that business is Kraken. And it's so good that the competitors are licensing it. And it's giving Octopus Energy this unfair advantage to become number one, because it is about the data and it is about the experience for customers.
So you remember a couple of episodes ago, we were talking about if you set an example so good, change will happen because people want to emulate it.
Right. Yeah. And you have to feel sorry for, everybody else who's wanted to disrupt or improve the energy space. But, Greg Jackson's done such a stunning job. And people just go, it's just another energy company. But it's not.
But it clearly isn't. It clearly isn't. And it's funny because I think Octopus is kind of, cleaning up all of the other small startup challenger energy firms usually did a pretty shonky job of doing what they're trying to do. But they've mopped up all the small ones that were essentially on the way out anyway, or, were about to be shut down by the ombudsman.
And that's hard, right? It's hard to do those acquisitions unless you have this unfair advantage with data.
Yeah.
Because, losing customers' data, onboarding customers and not giving them a good experience, that's what's going to make or break you. Right? This customer was sticky with whatever firm had failed or that you've acquired. You want them to remain sticky. You don't want to give them a reason to think otherwise.
Yeah. I wonder to what extent Kraken is particularly optimized for the needs of energy customers. So in other words, they've not tried to solve the problem of CRM generally. They've tried to solve the problem of CRM in the context of energy supply. And I wonder to what extent they're optimized for that situation.
I would argue that, yes, it is optimized for these interactions that customers go through. Meter readings and switch dates and credits on the system and stuff like that, and self-serve statements and the like. But I would argue the fundamental underpinnings of customers being able to access information they need for all the common things they need, staff being able to look at a unified system and not get lost with what that customer has had interactions with, minimizing customer interactions because they can get the information quickly, are all things that, if you were going to do it with a clean slate, that's how you'd want to do it.
Hopefully, in the case of Kraken, they're not falling into the trap of just make it do this extra thing, just make it do this extra thing. The tentacles, if you like, grow.
Product manager and you speaking.
But that's the thing. I think every system starts off small initially, right? If you built it yourself, everything starts off small.
At UK entrepreneurs, they all start with every feature they can.
All right. Every system should start small because you don't have the money to build all the features, nor do you know whether any of those features are needed yet.
Right.
Anyway, aside from that, but every system needs to start small. And looking back at Slack started small. It did a couple of things really, really well. And then just at the point it started to get unwieldy, it started to get cocky, started dissing its competitors, somehow flukily, frankly, got acquired by Salesforce. Because otherwise it was just about to do that. Because everyone, I think, had been using Slack to any degree, had got hacked off with the fact that you couldn't see your old messages without shelling out so much money for the paid plans.
You know what? I think you're spot on. Slack was about to do a Dropbox where it was everybody's darling until everybody realized it wasn't.
Yeah. They thought they were a lot more important than they were. They thought they were the center of the universe. But everyone goes, you do realize we're still primarily using you because email is just so much worse. And that's it. Don't get above yourselves, lads. And that's the thing. So frankly, getting acquired at this point was literally the best thing that could have happened to them.
Yeah, great timing. John Hunt selling Foxtons 2 weeks before the financial crisis hits.
Yeah, nice touch. Yeah. I mean, Trello is Trello was the one acquired by Atlassian. That's why I was thinking of Atlassian. Trello, having had this ethos from the beginning of this is free, this will always be free, and then people suddenly going, oh my God, we've got millions of users, we have to support these millions of users, we've got absolutely no way of making money. How can we crowbar some money-making features into this? And eventually they built it to such a point where it was getting overstuffed, it was getting unwieldy, it was getting annoying, and then they somehow managed to sell it to Atlassian, at which point most of the customer base upped and left.
I mean, for Atlassian, it made sense, right? Because it's a better Jira. It's just a simpler, nicer interface that a lot of people know how to use now.
Yeah, but it was past its prime. It reached peak features and they kept adding more and kept adding more, and it just detracted from the experience.
Yeah, and it's a fine line, right? Between being the darling and then somebody else coming along and stealing a march because they understand the customer better. You know, there's this great example. Ludo, your protege.
Yeah.
He said, you know, when you're playing poker, these kids playing 10 games at the same time online, they're getting just more information. So they just have more information to be able to win. And then they come to the real-time games live, and there's a slow decay of that information. And the next kid with all the information and the freshness comes and wins. And it's the same with these businesses. They get further and further away from their customers the more customers they have. And they can't see the signal from all the noise.
Exactly. It's the tricky second album problem. Yeah? They smashed it out of the park with something that goes to number one in the US, in the UK, and then they have to make a follow-up album that meets the over-raised expectations of a loving audience. And frankly, unless you're the Beatles or unless you're someone like that, you're essentially going to struggle. And to be fair, the Beatles, they essentially alienated their audience with every album by just changing their sound up every single time. So even then, it's like you can't live up to the expectations of really knocking that first one out of the park if you don't really know how you did it the first time. I'm going to have to leave it there, dude. I've enjoyed this.
Cool. Till next time.
Till next time. You take it easy, okay?
See you later.
All right. Bye. You're listening to the Pig Wrestlers podcast. We're meant to be reviewing the book Never Wrestle With A Pig by Mark McCormack, but we don't always get around to it.